Okay, so guys, we're here at day two. We're talking
Well,
about writing the body. So we're going to go ahead and jump in. So if you're just joining us, I'll send the sign-in form for the student who's just joined us here in just a moment. But let's go ahead and go through our agenda. So once again, I am recording this, so you can go back and review the video later. So again, our focus today is on writing the body. Now, some of you have finished the first activity, so I know I do need to go in and review a few of the activities that were submitted this afternoon. But today we're focusing only on the body and how it connects back to the thesis. So that's really, I think, the most important part of writing the essay for the TOEFL is how to write the body. So we're going to spend some time talking about how we can begin to create ideas for the essay that we're talking about. Now, part of writing the body also means developing topic sentences. So we'll discuss how to create those, and we'll look specifically at how to use signal words in our writing. Finally, we'll talk more about how to develop the body, thinking about the reasons and details, and how we connect that particular step to the brainstorming activity that we're going to be doing here in just a moment. Okay? All right, so once again, just to quickly review, we are talking about the TOEFL IBT independent writing section. So remember, the independent writing section is where basically you have to plan, sort of prepare, write, and revise a written response to one of the three different types of essays. So whether it's explanatory, defense, or comparison. Now, I'm not going to review those here today. We mentioned those in the previous class and also in the video I shared last week. But again, on the test, you're given 30 minutes to do everything. Now, we're not worried about time here this evening. Okay, so in writing this essay, we're not focused so much on time. But I just want to let you know that this part of the TOEFL is pretty intense. You have to be prepared to write in 30 minutes. Okay, so today the body is what we're talking about. And again, generally the body is what we think of as the heart of the essay. So generally there are 2 to 4 paragraphs that we use in writing the independent task. So again, we're not necessarily going to be writing the body in this next activity that we're going to do, but we are going to think about how to develop it. Okay, so again, that's what we're going to be looking at here this afternoon. Now, once again, don't forget our topic. So this is the topic that we're using throughout our workshop and in the writing process. So once again, I'm going to read it real quickly. Some people choose friends who are different from themselves. Others choose friends who are similar to themselves. So compare the advantages of having friends who are different from you with the advantages of having friends who are similar. And then, of course, at the end of the essay, what kind of friend do you prefer and why? Now, already I can see from some of the people who have submitted their exercises, it seems like we're off to a good start in understanding that the main idea here is we're basically comparing the advantages of both groups. So that is part of the thesis that we're trying to prove. So that's not really a difficult thesis to prove. In this case, though, the question is, how can I make this essay interesting and show people that I know what I'm talking about? Well, that's going to be our next activity. And actually, this next activity is one where everybody's going to get to participate. So often when I teach the TOEFL or when I teach writing classes, I like to include an activity where we get to think a little bit before we actually write. Now, again, I chose this topic because I think everyone here can relate to both sides. I think we all have friends who are probably different from us, and we probably have friends who are similar. So in this activity, we often call this activity pros and cons, but in this case, we're only focusing on the pros, really, the advantages of both groups. Now, what I would like to do here in just a moment, I'm going to exit the presentation, okay? And what I'm going to do is we're going to turn on the mics here in just a moment, and basically I'm going to get you guys to help me think about some reasons, some things that we can put on both sides of this activity. So okay. Now, again, we could sit here and do this this activity for quite a while. I mean, I think the nice thing about a lot of the topics that you see on the TOEFL, even though we don't spend a lot of time thinking about these things, and don't worry, when we get into the third week, I'm going to post a document where the TOEFL has really given us some help. They've given us the chance to basically look at many of the different types of writing assignments that we can see on the test. And in my experience, I think everyone can kind of relate to that information, but we just don't sit around and talk about these things. I mean, let's be honest, you guys probably don't say, hey, let's have a cup of coffee. Oh, and let's talk about the advantages of friends who were similar and friends who were different. You know, we don't really talk about these things. So in some ways, that's why I like to start with this kind of activity, because then we have to speak out loud and share what we're thinking. And then by talking to other people, we can kind of start to develop our ideas. So what I want you to think about in this brainstorming activity, it's kind of like your brain. You know, your brain is kind of talking to both sides and thinking about, okay, well, what about this side? What about this side? Now, of course, on the TOEFL, you can't really talk to anybody. But again, we're here to talk about how to be a better writer, not just necessarily for the TOEFL. So again, we're going to come back to these ideas in just a few minutes, but I'm going to go ahead and pick up and start from there. Okay, so let me go ahead and continue there. All right, so let's continue. So again, so in thinking about those ideas, now we're getting ready to think about writing the body. So again, as I mentioned earlier, I want you to think of the body as the heart of your response. It's by far the most important part on the TOEFL essay because it's explaining what you believe. So the body is really showing how we connect to the thesis. So again, each paragraph of the body is going to show us the different parts of the thesis that we're writing. So in this case, a typical body on the TOEFL contains about 2 to 3 paragraphs. So if you think about it, with our topic, one paragraph is going to talk about the advantages of friends who are different, and another paragraph is to talk about those who are similar. And what we're trying to do is to think about what reasons can we put in those paragraphs. So now, in terms of writing the body, the first thing we have to think about is what we call the topic sentence. Now, the topic sentence is that very first sentence that we see, and it shows us two things really at the same time. The first thing it shows us is how we connect back to the thesis. And one way that we do that is using a signal word. Now, we'll talk about signal words in just a moment. But of course, the topic sentence also prepares the reader for what we're going to see in the body paragraph. So again, it explains, it says, for example, here are the advantages of friends who are different, and maybe it starts to prepare us for what we're going to see in the paragraph. Okay. Now, I don't know necessarily if again, many of the students in the group here, some of you have been in my classes for a while, some maybe just for a little bit. But one of the things I like to talk about in terms of reading and in writing are what we call signal words. And signal words are very important when writing on the TOEFL, and of course when writing in general. So what are signal words? Well, they help to provide structure and organization to not only the topic sentence, not only the first sentence, but also how we use kind of signals throughout the essay. Now, the first thing I'm going to share with you here in the presentation is a list of many different kinds of signal words. And I think pretty much everybody here in this group would recognize most of them. But one of the problems that students often have in writing on the TOEFL is they often don't put enough signals to tell the reader how one idea connects to the other. Now, I know a lot of you, when you're talking to people, we use a lot of signals like and but. Unfortunately, we often repeat a lot of those. So I think one of the nice things about learning about signals is we also kind of develop a better vocabulary for how to connect information. So in this case, we're going to take a look at some signal words and try to understand how they show relationships. So I'm going to show you right now. And again, I have attached this to the next week's TOEFL activity. So this will give us a chance, and it should be opening in your screen right now. So this is a list of signal words. I'm going to zoom in here if we can, so maybe you can see those there. And you will notice that there are many, many, many different kinds of signal words that we use in language. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you will notice, for example, we have signals of continuation. So you probably recognize many of these words like and, furthermore, in addition. All right, you've probably seen some of those before. The next category is probably going to be helpful for us for the comparison essay, which is what we call change of direction signals. So again, words like although or however, on the other hand. So for example, we're comparing, the advantages of friends who are different. On the other hand, friends who are similar to us also can give us, some benefits. Probably the most popular type of signal we use in topic sentences are called sequence signals. And again, you probably recognize the first ones there. First, second, third. These are fairly common signals that we often use in showing the organization of an essay. Time signals, again, you probably recognize many of these words like when, at the same time. Believe it or not, there are many different kinds of signals. And again, these signal words help to show how things connect. Now, I am not suggesting that you necessarily just need to, take this paper of signal words in one hand and then, writing in the other and just put tons and tons of signals into it. No, but the truth is good writing has good signals and tells the reader how one piece of information connects to the other. So again, a signal word can really help in connecting information. And I have attached a copy of those signal words to our next week's TOEFL activity. Okay. Now, as I mentioned earlier, many writers use sequence signals in the topic sentence. So again, words like first and second. And if you remember last week, I included a sample essay. This sample essay was about cats. And I think this is a pretty good kind of sample essay for us to look at. Now, the topic, of course, is not related to what we're doing. We're not talking about, defending or explaining a point of view. We're trying to show comparisons. But I wanted to use this sample essay just to demonstrate how a good writer uses signal words, especially in the topic sentence. So, for example, I'm going to bring up the sample essay that I attached to your information from last week. So hopefully you had a chance to look at this sample essay. So again, in this sample essay, at the beginning, I've highlighted different things. So for example, first paragraph is the introduction. And then paragraphs 2, 3, and 4 are the body paragraphs. Now, again, we're going to look a little bit more at the body in just a moment. But I want to kind of point out, just by looking at the topic sentences, now remember, here the topic sentences are in italics. So they're kind of leaning to one side. But if you notice in this first paragraph, can anybody identify, maybe with their microphone, or it could be the chat box, probably the mic's easier. What signal do we see here in this first body paragraph? Can somebody tell us what signal words do we see here in the part that I've highlighted?
In the first?
Yeah, in the first place. Yeah, so that tells me this is the first idea, okay? Now, if we think about how the topic sentence connects to the thesis, well, remember the thesis of this essay is basically saying how good cats are. Now, I completely 100% disagree with this person, but still, if you're a cat person, maybe you agree. But if you notice in their thesis, they say, cats make excellent house pets as they are good companions. So that's what this person says. Well, again, if you notice, in the topic sentence of the first paragraph, it says, people enjoy the companionship of cats. So guys, what I'm trying to show you here this afternoon is the topic sentence is doing two things. It's showing us how we connect to the thesis. So this is the first idea. And then it's going to explain in the rest of the paragraph, well, what exactly does that mean? The companionship. And we'll take a look at that here in just a moment. So again, signal words are very helpful in telling the reader how to organize information. Let's take a look at the third paragraph. And again, if you notice, the signal in paragraph 3 here is in the second place. So again, there's that signal word, that sequence. And then it mentions that cats are the civilized members of the household, which connects back to the thesis. The thesis said they are civilized members of the household. So again, the thesis, as we said last week, is like the roadmap. Now the body is kind of connecting to the thesis, and a good written thesis here helps to show the reader exactly what to expect. Now, guys, our essay is not nearly this detailed. We only need to mention in the thesis that we're going to talk about the advantages of friends who are different and the advantages of friends who are similar. So one of the activities you're going to do for next week is to think about, how can I write a topic sentence for the essays that we are practicing with? So that's kind of what we're thinking about here in this workshop, okay? All right, so I've returned to the presentation. So on the screen, you will see kind of a visual representation of how this looks. So there's the introduction, right? So there's part one. That's what we talked about last week. Today, we're talking about part two, the body, which is the heart, the center of the essay. Next week, we'll look at part three. Now, again, to just kind of illustrate in a different way, let's focus just on the body for a moment. Okay, so now the body is there. So the body itself has 3 paragraphs. 2 paragraphs maybe for our essay, since we're talking about 2 sides. And then the question here is, there's the thesis at the end of the introduction. Well, again, the topic sentence has to connect to the thesis. It has to reflect what the thesis is saying. So our topic sentences are going to show that we're comparing in one paragraph to the next idea in the next paragraph. Okay? All right, so now let's talk about writing the body paragraph. Now, we're not going to write a body paragraph right now. Instead, we're just going to kind of keep developing ideas for our body paragraph. But to let everybody know, students always want to know, well, how long is a paragraph? How many sentences do I need? Well, Anne Hogue, which is a writer that I've used, her book, The Essentials of English, I've used it in previous years. She mentions that basically a paragraph is a group of sentences that discuss usually one main idea. Now, students always want to know, well, how long is a paragraph? What's a good length? Well, she suggests that a minimum would be around 3 sentences, and that probably a maximum would be 10 to 15 sentences. Now, I don't necessarily think that 10 to 15, I think that's probably too long for us. So usually I would say thinking at least about 5, maybe 7 sentences would be a good body paragraph. So again, in thinking about our particular essay, so now we've seen what the body looks like. The body has 3 paragraphs, 2 paragraphs or 3 paragraphs. And then if we kind of zoom in, so as we zoom into one of these paragraphs, now we can see how a paragraph is organized. So once again, we mentioned a topic sentence is going to be at the beginning. Then we're going to take those examples. Now, so again, the examples we mentioned just a few minutes ago, and we're going to try to show how those examples connect to the main idea. Now, guys, again, our main idea is basically thinking about the advantages of friends who are different and friends who are similar. But as we develop our argument, we really want to think about which reason should I use? If I'm going to use a reason, how many reasons should I put in one paragraph? Should I choose 1 reason, 2 reasons? That's something that I think that's a big challenge for students. Oftentimes when students write on the TOEFL, they usually just try to list, here's 1 reason, here's another reason, here's another reason, and they think, oh, that I'm finished. Well, remember, the TOEFL or any essay is not just a list. It's not just a list of stuff. You actually have to explain yourself a little bit. So that's kind of where we're finishing up here this evening. We're going to take a reason from the exercise we did just a few minutes ago, and we're going to think about, well, what personal examples can we use to show why we believe this? Why do we think this is a good idea? Okay, so if you think about it, a typical body paragraph starts with a topic, has a personal example or a reason somewhere in the paragraph, and then usually we finish the paragraph with some short conclusion. So now, at this point, what I'm going to suggest is looking at sample essays to help think about how to write a good body paragraph. So for example, I'm just going to go through this pretty quickly. If you'll notice here on the screen, I've got the sample essay, the cat essay, and just the first paragraph that you can see here on the screen. Okay, so hopefully you can see that there. So as it says before, we mentioned that one of the reasons they liked cats, right, was because of their companionship. So in that topic sentence, that's what we're focusing on. So the key here is the writer wants to show us, well, okay, well, how do they enjoy this companionship? How are cats good companions? Well, for example, guys, if you follow the writer's kind of ideas, one reason they say is because cats are affectionate. Now, again, I don't know if we have any cat people in here, but to me, I think cats usually either ignore you or don't don't really pay much attention to you. But in this case, the writer is saying, well, they're affectionate, and of course, the question is, how does the writer develop that reason? Well, she gives an example. She says they will snuggle up and ask to be petted or scratched under the chin. Who can resist a purring cat? So if you notice, one of the reasons she mentions, she gives us a clear reason. Cats are affectionate. And then she gives us an example. She actually gives some detail to prove what she means. She doesn't just say, well, cats are affectionate. Notice the next reason, the point she makes, cats are playful and cats can be trained. So those are the three kind of reasons she mentions in this paragraph. But she doesn't just list them, she actually explains what she believes. So that's what I want you to think about here is that when we choose reasons for our essay, we need to include explanations for why we believe what we believe. Okay, so that's the idea. The writer continues to choose another reason. So if they're not affectionate, they're playful, and then shows exactly how they're playful. They like to chase balls and feathers, you know. So again, the idea here is the writer is showing us taking the reasons that she developed or introduced in the introduction, in the thesis, and then explains them. Now, guys, in our essay, so again, let's think about our essay. So for a comparison essay, really all we have to think about is one paragraph is going to discuss the advantages of friends who are different. The next paragraph is going to talk about the advantages of friends who are similar. Now, let me pause the presentation for a moment. Let's go back to our brainstorming activity. So I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste it here so that we can see it again in the presentation. Okay. All right. Now, again, this is an opportunity for you just to think about there, at home. Let's look at both sides. And again, we could have spent 10, 15 minutes making a long list of ideas that we see here. For example, on the left side, we've got two very interesting reasons. You mentioned something about teaching you about things that you're unfamiliar with, so we can learn from people in terms of these experiences. We can also learn about different languages, cultures, traditions. Another thing we can think about is friends who are different can help us see things in a new way, things that we thought we knew, but now we can maybe get a new perspective, right? Okay, now on the right side, I kind of just took down some ideas. Now, as I'm looking at my list, and this is maybe where we can, kind of think a little bit more, which ideas do we think might be the strongest advantages for friends who are similar? Well, for example, I don't know about the friends who are honest with me. They may, they may be honest with me. They may not be. But I definitely think if they can sympathize with us because they already kind of understand where we're coming from, this might be a pretty strong example that we might want to use in the advantages of friends who are similar. So I'll circle this one for just a moment. Okay. And again, I like the two that we identified over on the left side. Now, thinking about again, if we're writing a really well-developed essay, well, let's see, we might want to think about one more reason. So maybe we could choose this one here, right, where they can support us in the same activities, encourage us, and of course, even if their interests are similar, they can help us learn things too. It's not just people who are different from us, but even people who have similar interests can teach us things too. Now, take a look. Now we have a certain balance when getting ready to write our essay. We've got two good reasons from the friends who are different. Now we have two reasons from the friends who are similar. Now, of course, guys, you can come up with other reasons on your own. And that's one of your activities for the next class, for homework, is to try to think of some reasons. Why do you believe these things? Now, you're perfectly welcome to use these ideas too. But maybe you can take a few more minutes and think, okay, what are some other ideas I can add to these two sides? Because guys, this right here is going to be the most important part of the essay. It's the reasons that for why you believe these things. Okay. Now, moving on and thinking about the reasons. So we've got our reasons now. So after we select those reasons, then we have to show kind of providing some support. We have to give some details and examples to support these reasons, right? So again, in our brainstorming exercise, as we go back for just a moment, now let's think for just a moment, what kind of examples or details can we use? Let's look at here for just a moment. I'm gonna again, we could talk about both sides, but let's think about this one right here. That was a very interesting one that somebody mentioned. People can sympathize with us a little bit. Now, if I'm going to choose this as a reason, the key is, well, why is that a good choice? What samples or examples or details can I provide here? Now, guys, I'm going to pause for just a moment. And guys, if we want to use our microphones, let's talk about this one for just a moment. Okay, so again, if you want to use your mics, let me put the participants back on the screen. Who could give us maybe an idea or two about this idea? What do you think might be a good example to help show in situations where we don't have to explain as much? Who's got an example for us? Sonia?
Yeah, my example would be kind of being an au pair or maybe being a parent when you're kind of, for example, if you have a hard day, your au pair friends or kind of your parents' friends do exactly know how you feel, so
Sure.
you don't need to explain yourself like
Hmm.
that point said, and you just feel more connected because you share your emotions with each other.
Right, right. I mean, that's what friends do, right? We try to seek some sort of sympathy from somebody. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and not only that, Sonia, but thinking about what I mentioned a minute ago, maybe they can give advice that I can say, oh yes, now that I've had this experience, I can see how that advice might help. So yeah, we can still learn things from people going through the same situation. Okay, yeah, I think that's a good point. Let's see, Tasi, I know you've got kids, right? Have you been talking to other parents? Have you been getting some support, Tasi, in this home education activity? Tasi may not be. Oh,
Yes,
there
I'm
we are.
sorry. I was on mute. I think we could share like
Well,
some ways
well, for
to.
example, are you doing that right now? Are there other parents that you're talking to about how to do this home education thing?
Yes, we are trying to do this right now, but I think we can share like the same difficult times and the same situations that we don't know how to do the
Yeah,
better way to do these things. I
right.
think it's more easy when you have some people that have the same situation that you.
Yeah, and of course, I know there are other people here in the group who have kids, or maybe again the au pairs. Maybe you're having to do a lot of the help with the at-home education. So most of you probably didn't think you were going to come to the United States to be a teacher, did you? So in this case, I think everybody here could probably share something there. And of course, guys, I think we all have a similarity if you think about it. Even though we have different languages, cultures, traditions, hey, let's be honest, we're all students in the same ESL program. That's something we can share, and that's an idea that we're all here for a similar purpose. So again, something we can add to this list is to think about, yeah, we have the same purpose, the same focus. We all want to, we all want to do that and maybe support ourselves in that. So guys, what I want you to think about here for next week. So the activity that I've posted and I'm going to post here to our TOEFL classroom is you're going to go through this process. You're going to brainstorm some ideas. And again, you're perfectly welcome to use some of the ones we talked about here tonight. But I really want you to thinking about what are those advantages? What are the advantages of friends who are different, advantages of friends who are similar? And then you will get the opportunity to start thinking more specifically because you will choose some of these reasons and then you'll start to think about some examples. Now, I like Sonia's idea. I like Tasi's idea. Everybody, I think, here, the more personal we can be, now we don't want to get too personal, but the idea is we want to share something about our own life experience. So, Sonia, I think that was excellent to think about, well, I'm an au pair. Let's write about that. And the truth is, that's going to make our writing much more interesting. I think a lot of students think that maybe they're not so interesting. They might think, my life's boring. Nobody wants to read about my life. But the truth is, if we give good details, you'll be amazed at how interesting the things you can say and how we can connect to those as a reader. Now, guys, I'm not an au pair, but I can certainly sympathize with the idea of, okay, yeah, maybe I'll talk to other teachers if I have some help or need some help. If I think about even just, I don't have kids, you know, so I don't have kids to worry about with the whole at-home thing, but I can certainly try to understand my friends who are going through that situation. So again, the idea is if we can connect it to ourselves, I think that makes our writing more interesting too. Okay. So again, we think about those details. So that's what I want to finish up here with tonight. Specific details and examples help to show the reader why we believe what we believe. That's the most important thing. If we can if we can use good reasons and show good examples and details and explain why those are so important and show us with those examples, I think you will notice, you know, how much more interesting that can be. So guys, my final comment here for the evening is, where can these details and examples come from? Well, guys, you've already demonstrated it here tonight. Our own personal experiences, for example. The more we can think about our own personal lives, believe me, it can be interesting, okay? Think about the experience of others. All right, so maybe it didn't happen to you, but maybe it happened to somebody else. And guys, I've got a little secret for you. There is no TOEFL police that's going to come to your house and ask you, did this really happen to you? So sometimes you can lie. You don't have to always tell the truth on the TOEFL. You can borrow someone else's experience and make it your own. But again, some students aren't very good liars. So again, you might just refer to the experience of your dad or your friends or something like that. Finally, we can think about any historical, social, or cultural experiences. Now, this one's a little bit harder, of course, on the TOEFL because we don't really get to research anything. We can't really share, examples necessarily from history. But again, think about your own countries. Think about people from your country. You might have some examples of a famous leader, some famous person. That's always, I think, a good source for writing is when we connect it to the society at large or our cultural experiences. So again, I think though personal experiences are the best way to go, especially on the TOEFL. The TOEFL really is about your personal life and your personal opinions. So that's kind of my final comment for this evening is I really, really would recommend thinking about your own life. Okay, that's really where good writing comes from, is our own life experience. And everybody in this group here, you got life experience. Everybody does. Okay, so guys, our homework for next time. So immediately after class, when the video is ready, I'm going to post our next activity. Now, in this activity, you're going to do some of the same things we did here tonight. You're going to do a little brainstorming. So again, brainstorming on our thesis, which is, again, the friends who are different, friends who are similar. What are the advantages of those? And then you'll begin to develop. Now, notice we're not writing anything yet. We're not writing a full essay. We're just developing the body paragraph by thinking about, I'm going to choose a reason just to demonstrate, because again, we're not going to write everything, but I want you to choose one of the reasons that you've created in your brainstorming activity and try to think of a detail or example that will help support the argument you're trying to make, okay?